Thank you for today, truly. My heart sinks as I enter the house. I've flown across the country for my grandfather's 80th birthday celebration, only to find him abandoned and alone in his wheelchair. The birthday cake sits melting on the counter, and beside it, a hastily scribbled note borrowed 20K from joint account will return. The betrayal burns in my chest like acid. They've left him here, discarded like something worthless, thinking no one would discover their scheme. But I've already uncovered far more than they realize. What time is it where you are right now? And who would you entrust with your intellectual legacy? I wonder, feeling the weight of my discovery pressing down on me. You might need to reconsider everything you thought you knew, just as I've been forced to do. I hadn't expected elaborate decorations or a grand welcome party, but I did expect someone to answer the door when I knocked. The quiet Sunday afternoon in mid-October wraps around me like a cool blanket. The crisp autumn air of Wisconsin makes me shiver slightly as vibrant maple leaves scatter across the cracked pavement of the driveway, reminding me of all the important conversations left unspoken in this family. I pull my rental car to a stop, listening to the engine hum its final note before falling silent. In my lap rests a carefully wrapped first edition of my grandfather's favorite poet, the leather bindings smooth against my fingertips. I've paired it with a hand-woven scarf I discovered at an artisanal market in Seattle, knowing how Lawrence always complains about his shoulders getting cold during his reading sessions. I haven't returned home in years, not because I don't care deeply, but because I've never felt genuinely welcomed back by those who claimed to love him most. The screen door protests with a long creak as I push it open. The house greets me with emptiness, no sounds of conversation, no aromas of celebration meals cooking, just a heavy silence and the familiar scent of old books mingled with lemon furniture polish. "Grandfather," I call out, stepping carefully into the hallway, my voice echoing against the walls lined with bookshelves. The living room appears clean but eerily untouched. Several party hats remain in their plastic wrapping on the console table. A single balloon, now half deflated, hangs pathetically from a piece of Scotch tape on the wall. I find him in the study, facing the window, completely alone. His delicate hands rest on the arms of his wheelchair, pale and trembling slightly. The birthday cake, chocolate with blue decorative icing, sits abandoned on his desk, slowly collapsing on one side. He turns his silver-haired head toward me, his lips quivering into what attempts to be a welcoming smile. "Eliza," he says, his scholarly voice now thin and fragile. I told them to wait. They claimed they had important errands to run. Errands? I lean down to kiss his papery cheek, gently draping the scarf across his lap. The finely woven fabric feels inappropriately luxurious against the cold emptiness that has settled in this house. Did they mention when they'd return? I ask. Though I already know the answer from the note taped crudely to the refrigerator. A hastily attached note, likely secured with the same tape used for that sad balloon. Borrowed the funds 20K'd from joint account, will return. My eyes scan the message twice, absorbing every detail. The handwriting appears rushed and impersonal, the kind of tone reserved for a distant acquaintance rather than family, certainly not your own sister. I feel the burn of anger rising in my throat. "Grandfather," I say slowly, kneeling beside his wheelchair. "Did Victoria share anything else with you?" He sighs deeply. His breath sounds shallow, but his voice still carries the weight of his years of academic authority. "I specifically asked them to include you. I told them you were coming, explained how meaningful your presence would be to me, but they insisted it was too complicated." Complicated? That familiar word again. He averts his gaze, looking back toward the window. "They refuse to consider changing the date. My mind floods with memories of all the birthdays I missed throughout my childhood. Not by choice, but because I was deliberately given incorrect times or locations. I'd booked my flight months ago, just as I promised when we spoke last spring about his upcoming birthday and publication anniversary. But naturally, no one else had remembered this commitment. Or perhaps they remembered all too well. Perhaps that was precisely their intention. I stand slowly and walk toward his desk. The celebration cake has begun to lean precariously, like an exhausted scholar at the end of a long lecture. I stare at it for a prolonged moment before glancing back at the note. The joint account referenced was established when grandfather's health needs began increasing. I had handled all the paperwork from Seattle, conscientiously transferring my portion every quarter, maintaining meticulous records of every transaction. I access the account on my phone. The balance reads 0. Everything is gone. Every single penny. I don't scream or curse. I simply press my palm against the refrigerator door over that callous note, letting the cold metal surface steady my racing thoughts. They didn't just forget about me, I whisper, feeling the truth sink deep into my bones. They deliberately erased me. Grandfather remains silent. There's no need for him to respond. It takes less than 20 minutes to fully comprehend the depth of my exclusion. No decorations, no guests, no extra chairs, not even a simple birthday card. I move quietly through the familiar space, boiling water, locating 2 chipped mugs, cutting precise slices of the neglected cake. I wipe down his desk, gently adjust his collar, and select his favorite classical recording from the dusty phonograph in the corner of his study. He smiles then, a genuine smile that illuminates his scholarly face, even if only momentarily. As we sit together, steam rising from our tea, I check my phone again. No messages, no missed calls, not even from my mother. The painful truth crystallizes: I wasn't late to the celebration. I was deliberately excluded. This wasn't simple negligence. This was calculated strategy. I hold my teacup close, inhaling the fragrant bergamot, mixed with a bitterness that matches my mood. Grandfather gently pats my hand. You've always known exactly how to improve difficult situations, Eliza. I smile back, though the expression doesn't reach my eyes. Something fundamental has shifted within me. I'm no longer the insecure academic's daughter desperately seeking validation from my family. I've grown wiser, more confident, and frankly exhausted with their manipulations. They assumed I would remain silent as always, that I would crumble under the weight of their cold rejection. But today I feel something more powerful than sadness coursing through me. Pure determination. This ends today, I whisper with quiet intensity. And I absolutely mean it. Grandfather's teacup sits abandoned near his elbow, the steam long dissipated. He's resting in his recliner now, wrapped in the scarf I brought, his eyelids fluttering between drowsiness and watching the autumn wind toss leaves outside his window. I've been moving around the study like a scholarly ghost, silent yet purposeful. The cake has been properly covered, the dishes washed. But I cannot settle my restless mind. My gaze drifts toward the hallway to his personal library, the room that mysteriously never appears in any of their social media updates. I walk down the narrow corridor, each step intensifying the pressure in my chest like a metronome counting beats I cannot ignore. The light in his library is dim. I switch it on, half expecting someone to reprimand me for investigating. Old habits persist, but the room stands empty. Only the scent of aged paper, leather-bound books, a jar of reading glasses on the side table, and a framed photograph of my mother from her university graduation. The blue journal in the top drawer, Grandfather had mumbled earlier, his scholarly voice cracking with emotion. There's something important I've been meaning to share with you. I open the drawer carefully. Tucked beneath academic papers and research notes lies a leather portfolio, worn soft at the corners from countless openings. I sit on the edge of his reading chair, cross my legs and gently lift the cover. Photographs appear first, black and white, some faded Polaroids from decades past. Me as a child sitting in Grandfather's lap while he reads aloud from Chaucer. My kindergarten portrait with glasses too large for my small face. A handmade birthday card I'd created for him with uneven letters spelling for my favorite professor incorrectly. Then comes the locket. I hold it in my palm, feeling its familiar weight. Inside, my baby picture on one side, the other side waiting empty. I smile through the ache spreading through my chest. At the bottom, beneath a folded handkerchief, lies a document. My name immediately catches my attention: Eliza Morgan. It's a co-authorship agreement dated years ago, before the early signs of dementia began appearing. Grandfather and I are both listed as future co-authors of his final scholarly work. No Victoria, no Nathan. But it remains unofficial, lacking notarization. Witness signatures. Just 2 names connected by intellectual purpose. He must have shown it to them, or attempted to. Perhaps that explains why Victoria blocked my number last year. Why Nathan sent that dismissive text in April. You're always overthinking everything, Eliza. Maybe stay in Seattle this year. I grip the paper tightly. So this was their scheme all along. Keep me physically distant, then professionally invisible, and eventually written out of his intellectual legacy entirely. The sensation resembles being academically plagiarized while wearing velvet gloves. The most damaging betrayals never announce themselves loudly. They whisper through calculated omissions. I stand, switch off the light, and return the portfolio exactly as I found it. My mind races with implications as I head back to the study to check on grandfather. He stirs slightly, offering a faint smile when he sees me. "Did you find it?" he asks, scholarly instincts still sharp. "I did," he nods painfully. "They insisted you had your own career path, that you wouldn't want to be burdened with my academic legacy." "I never said any such thing." "I know." A meaningful silence stretches between us. "Just before I turn to prepare another cup of tea," he murmurs, "I tried to correct the situation. I tried repeatedly, Eliza, but they consistently made me feel it would be simpler to acquiesce." My hands tremble noticeably, not from sadness now, but from indignation. That kind of quiet erosion of will gradually destroys a person's spirit. And they had counted on exactly that. Later that afternoon, while grandfather naps, I take out the recycling. A printed brochure catches my eye, protruding from beneath papers, a glossy trifold with gold academic borders. Honoring our literary legacy, the Lawrence Morgan Distinguished Lecture Series. Date today. Time 100 p.m. Location University Alumni Hall. I nearly dropped the recycling bin in shock. The promotional photo shows Nathan in a navy blazer, raising a toast. Victoria wears her pearls and that self-satisfied smile she reserves exclusively for academic functions and gallery openings. Grandfather is conspicuously absent from the image because he wasn't actually there. I grab my phone, search social media, and discover it immediately. A complete album of photographs. Such a beautiful literary tribute. Nathan and Victoria, you're truly remarkable for establishing this in your father's honor. Comment after flattering comment. Praise constructed entirely on fabrications. My stomach clenches painfully. I don't realize I'm crying until my tears blur the screen beneath my finger. This transcends my personal exclusion now. They've exploited grandfather, his scholarly reputation, his very name for professional advancement. He doesn't even know about this event supposedly honoring him. I sink onto the couch, clutching the locket in one hand and the brochure in the other. A storm begins gathering outside. Sharp wind gusts rattle the windows, thunder rumbles in the distance. I feel the atmospheric pressure mirroring something building inside me. That's when I open my laptop. Bank statements, joint account withdrawals, screenshots, emails between Nathan and a literary agent, one I recognize from when I attempted to inquire about grandfather's publishing rights. All the evidence exists in fragments waiting to be systematically assembled. And that callous note on the refrigerator. I capture a high-resolution photograph of it. They believed I wouldn't appear. They assumed I wouldn't discover their scheme. They were profoundly mistaken. I create a new document and begin constructing a detailed timeline. Not for legal purposes yet, but for myself. Because when you've been deliberately erased from a narrative, the first essential step is documenting your rightful place within it. By the time dusk settles over the house, I've systematically documented everything available. I've backed up photographs to secure cloud storage, created a folder labeled Academic Record, and meticulously tagged each screenshot with precise dates. Something about clicking Save makes this feel tangibly real, as though I'm reclaiming fragments of intellectual history they assumed were disposable. I stand, stretch my tense muscles, and walk to the guest room to prepare fresh bedding. As I pull open the dresser drawer, a small paper clipping flutters out, landing near my foot. A news article yellowed and brittle at the edges. I pick it up carefully. Distinguished academics Nathan and Victoria Morgan Established Literary Foundation. There's a photograph of them standing outside the university library, hands clasped like some academic power couple who regularly appears on bestseller lists. Below that, paragraphs about their years of dedication preserving literary heritage and transforming the family legacy into a center for intellectual discourse and cultural preservation. Intellectual discourse and cultural preservation. I sit heavily on the edge of the bed, feeling numb with disbelief. There's no mention of me whatsoever. No acknowledgement of the months I spent digitizing grandfather's early manuscripts, or the years I remained in Wisconsin cataloging his collection while they attended international conferences and literary retreats. Not even a reference to grandfather's dementia diagnosis, which I researched extensively, tracked methodically, and developed comprehensive care plans for from across the country. They've completely rewritten the scholarly narrative. They claimed you abandoned the family's academic tradition. I recall a colleague commenting once, said you preferred commercial work over serious scholarship. No, I simply didn't transform intellectual labor into personal branding opportunities. I close my eyes, fighting back the hot tears rising. They aren't merely appropriating financial assets. They're stealing scholarly legacy, historical accuracy, intellectual credit. They rewrote my entire academic contribution. And everyone in the field applauded them, I whisper, carefully folding the paper. Later that night, the house fills with familiar sounds. The gentle creaking of century-old floorboards, grandfather's soft snoring in his recliner, wind tapping against the windows like an urgent message. Then comes a knock, soft, hesitant. I peek through the side window and feel surprised. Ethan, Victoria's teenage son, stands on the porch, hoodie pulled up, hands thrust deep into his pockets as though afraid they might betray his intentions. I open the door slightly. "Does your mother know you're here?" He quickly shakes his head. "No way. I needed to talk to you privately." I invite him inside. He smells like teenage aftershave and nervous anxiety. He sits at the kitchen table, eyes darting around nervously. "They made me block you on social media last year. Told me you were being difficult, that you were trying to claim intellectual property that didn't belong to you." My jaw tightens, but I remain silent. "I believed them," he admits, voice lowered. "But today I overheard them talking in the car. I saw something disturbing." He retrieves his phone, scrolls through his gallery, and shows me a screenshot. It's a group message thread between Nathan, Victoria, and several names I don't recognize. We need to ensure she's completely removed from the academic narrative. One message states bluntly. Then another from Victoria herself, let her play the victimized intellectual. We'll control the entire literary estate regardless. I stare at the evidence. Not merely cruelty, but calculated academic erasure. Ethan looks deeply uncomfortable. "I'm really sorry," he mumbles. "I had no idea what they were actually doing." I nod slowly. "I knew. I just couldn't conclusively prove it until now." Before leaving, he says, "I think grandfather deserves to know the truth, but they'll be furious if they discover I came here." "You needn't worry about that," I assure him gently. "Thank you for showing more academic integrity than your parents." After he leaves, I return to my laptop and type a name I hadn't considered in years. Harold Bennett, grandfather's long-time intellectual property attorney. He'd helped draft publishing agreements long before Nathan became involved. The contact information still works. "Mr. Bennett?" I ask when he answers. "Who's calling, please?" "This is Eliza Morgan, Lawrence Morgan's granddaughter." A thoughtful pause. "Now there's a name I haven't encountered in quite some time," he says deliberately. "I was informed you'd relocated overseas for a research position. They explained you wanted to disconnect from family publishing matters." I swallow hard against rising anger. "I never made any such statement. I certainly never signed any documentation to that effect." Another pause, this one significantly longer. "That's certainly interesting," he remarks, "because your name was removed from the joint publication draft approximately 4 years ago. They claimed you'd signed a release of intellectual rights." My pulse pounds in my ears. "I never saw any release document." "I absolutely never signed one." "I suspected as much," he murmurs. "Because you were prominently featured in the original publication agreement. I've retained a copy. Would you like me to email it to you immediately?" "Yes, please. That would be extremely helpful." After ending the call, I create a new email titled, "For Legal Documentation." I attach screenshots, dates, Ethan's messages, even a PDF tracking the bank withdrawal pattern. Somewhere between righteous anger and methodical determination, I experience perfect clarity. Not because I seek vengeance, but because I need historical truth to be properly preserved. Grandfather stirs in his recliner around 200 a.m. and I assist him to the bathroom. He moves more deliberately these days. Each step a careful negotiation between balance and patience. Back in the living room, he sits and gazes at me with those pale, scholarly eyes. "They'll return soon," he says softly. "They'll pretend nothing unusual has occurred." I crouch beside him, gently taking his hand. The next time they walk through that door, I won't be silently acquiescing anymore. Grandfather has barely finished his morning oatmeal when the doorbell chimes, bright and cheerful. Like someone announcing good news they didn't legitimately earn. I wipe my hands on a towel, mentally preparing myself. Through the lace curtains, I see them approaching. Nathan wearing a pressed designer polo, Victoria in a coral blouse that perfectly matches her lipstick. Their smiles appear identical. Wide, eager, completely artificial. They burst through the front door like actors entering a carefully staged production. "Happy belated birthday, Dad!" Nathan's voice sounds unnaturally elevated, like he's pitching a concept he knows lacks substance. Victoria follows closely behind, arms filled with pastel balloons and an elegant bakery box. We brought those special pastries from the artisanal bakery you love, remember? Her voice drips with performative sweetness. I remain motionless in the study doorway. Victoria catches my eye, her smile visibly tightening. As she leans in for a perfunctory hug, she whispers just loudly enough for me to hear. Still playing the devoted academic assistant. I see. Her expensive perfume smells overwhelmingly like artificial roses and chemical undertones. I don't return her embrace. Grandfather observes them from his recliner with polite detachment. "Where were you yesterday?" he asks quietly, his professor's voice still carrying authority. "Oh, Dad," Victoria laughs dismissively. "We had several important commitments to manage. We thought we'd make it up to you today with these gourmet treats." She places an elegantly wrapped package on the coffee table as though bestowing a precious artifact. I remain silent, watching them hover around him with exaggerated affection. Nathan hands him a card, casually touches his thinning silver hair, and removes his phone to capture a selfie with Grandfather, who deliberately doesn't smile. They stay for barely an hour, long enough to create the illusion of familial devotion, but insufficient to demonstrate genuine care. When they finally depart, I wait until I hear their luxury SUV engine fade before examining the gift package. Beneath layers of tissue paper lies an envelope labeled Literary Estate Finalization. No card, no personal note, just that clinical heading. Something cold and heavy settles in my chest. I open it carefully. Legal documentation. A complete rights transfer form that would place Grandfather's entire intellectual property under Nathan and Victoria's exclusive control. Grandfather's signature appears at the bottom, shaky and uncharacteristic with a notary stamp. My name appears nowhere on the document. I hold it up to the window light. The ink shimmers with telltale signs of recent application. They hadn't brought birthday treats. They'd delivered a calculated intellectual theft disguised as a gift. They offered pastries with one hand while holding legal daggers in the other. I murmur to myself. I check the notarization date. It's from 2 weeks ago. Did they manipulate him into signing this while I was still in Seattle? I whisper. Grandfather had mentioned not recalling signing any significant documents. Now I understand why. Nathan returns alone 15 minutes later, claiming he forgot his designer sunglasses. He finds me at the dining table examining the document. He pauses, then smiles with practiced charm. Still occupying the guest room? I remain perfectly still. You forged his signature on this document? He raises an eyebrow with theatrical surprise. Excuse me? This legal form, I say, tapping the edge deliberately. This intellectual property transfer. Do you honestly believe I'll stand by while you casually display a few pastries and systematically strip away his entire literary legacy with a fraudulent signature? He chuckles, stepping closer. You're being characteristically dramatic, Eliza. Am I really? He leans in, eyes cold with calculation. Who would possibly believe your version, Eliza? You're the estranged academic, remember? I'm the responsible publisher. Victoria's the devoted caretaker. You send scarves and occasional emails about digital archives. I fold the document methodically, returning it to its envelope. Perhaps no one believes me yet. He doesn't respond, simply straightens his designer shirt and exits, whistling casually as though this were merely routine business. That night, as the fire crackles in the hearth and Grandfather dozes nearby, I sit beside him. He stirs slightly, opening his scholarly eyes. I remember when they used to request bedtime stories about literary giants, he says faintly, his voice filled with weary nostalgia. Now they fabricate fictions in publishing contracts. I swallow against the emotion rising in my throat. He hasn't seen the actual document, but something in his academic intuition already comprehends the situation. Perhaps not every detail, but enough to understand the betrayal. I tuck a blanket around him, gently brushing cookie crumbs from his cardigan. He gives me a gentle smile before drifting back to sleep, murmuring my name as though it represents the only authentic element in this narrative. Later that evening, I add the document to my academic record folder, label it publication fraud, and email a copy to Mr. Bennett. Then I turn off the lights, sit in darkness, and wait patiently. Because the next name on the paperwork is a notary public. According to the signature date, she's scheduled to return tomorrow morning for final verification. Suddenly, everything connects logically. The pastries, the gift package, Nathan's transparent excuse about forgotten sunglasses. They weren't improvising. They were executing a carefully orchestrated performance. By dawn, I've managed barely 2 hours of sleep. The document sits on the kitchen counter beside my coffee mug, secured in a protective sleeve. The sun hasn't fully risen, but my determination has completely crystallized. I'm rinsing Grandfather's teacup when the doorbell sounds again. A different tone this time. Not artificially cheerful, but professional, measured, efficient. I open the door to find a woman in her mid-50s, dressed in a navy business suit carrying a leather portfolio. Good morning. I'm Rebecca Palmer, Notary Public. Mr. Whitfield scheduled me for final signature verification this morning. Mr. Whitfield? That name appears on the rights transfer paperwork some local publishing agent Nathan had likely cultivated. I step aside deliberately, keeping my voice measured. Of course, please come in. She follows me to the dining room. Grandfather remains in his chair near the fireplace, dozing peacefully with a blanket across his knees. As she places her bag down and arranges her paperwork, he stirs slightly. His eyes study her with confusion. Have we met previously? Rebecca smiles politely but falters visibly. We met last month, sir. You signed preliminary publishing documents. I simply need your final authorization today. I turn toward the counter, composing myself while preparing 2 mugs. Would you prefer coffee or perhaps tea? She hesitates noticeably. Tea? Yes, thank you. While the kettle heats, I move toward the hallway where my phone charged overnight. I message Olivia, need professional oversight on a developing situation. Can you video conference in 10 minutes? Notary present. Significant intellectual property issues arising. 3 dots pulse immediately. Then yes, ready to assist. Don't authorize anything and document everything. I return with 2 mugs and politely request Rebecca's professional identification. She blinks with surprise. Certainly. She provides her credentials, visibly unsettled by my calm scrutiny. I pretend to examine them while activating the voice recorder on my phone and initiating a video call. Just 1 moment, please, I say, positioning the phone toward the table, its screen discreetly showing Olivia's professional presence beside the legal paperwork. Then I sit down. Before proceeding, I say with measured calm, could you please specify exactly who requested this appointment? Who specifically initiated this final document validation? Rebecca looks puzzled. I was contacted by Nathan Morgan. He assured me everything was properly arranged with the family. That Mr. Morgan, she glances at Grandfather, had reviewed and approved the documents. He has not, I reply firmly, and you're currently on a call with Olivia Winters, intellectual property attorney licensed in California. She would like to observe these proceedings. Rebecca blinks, suddenly uncertain. Is this legally appropriate? Olivia's voice comes through clearly and professionally. It's absolutely within our legal rights to document any process that potentially involves elder exploitation of intellectual property. I'm merely observing at this stage. Rebecca's hands freeze on the table. I wasn't informed of these circumstances. The door opens abruptly. Nathan walks in, designer sunglasses hanging casually from his collar like some academic celebrity. Excellent, Rebecca. Everything prepared? He glances around, clearly surprised by the unexpected audience. We're fully prepared here, he adds, his eyes sliding past me to the folder she had begun to open. No, Nathan, I interject firmly. We are not. He straightens, his practiced smile tightening. Come on, Eliza. Let's not transform this into you arranged this appointment without Dad's knowledge or consent. He doesn't even recall meeting with you. Grandfather blinks slowly, confusion evident. Did I? I don't remember any such meeting. Exactly my point, I say, my voice gaining strength. And you've systematically exploited that cognitive uncertainty to manipulate his intellectual legacy. Rebecca looks between us now, visibly uncomfortable. Olivia remains visible on screen, silent but recording everything. You forged his signature on the original document. Attempting to legitimize it now doesn't eliminate the underlying fraud. You're being characteristically dramatic, Nathan says with a forced chuckle, his charm visibly deteriorating. I'm being factually accurate. Olivia finally speaks again, her tone professionally clipped. Nathan, you should be aware that any legal document signed by someone lacking full cognitive capacity, particularly under family pressure, is contestable in court as fraud. Rebecca stands, gathering her materials quickly. I cannot proceed under these circumstances. This situation falls outside standard notarial practice. I'm leaving immediately. As she exits, Nathan gives me one contemptuous look. You always were the emotional academic in the family. And you, I respond firmly, always hid behind contracts and professional titles. But remember this crucial fact. Nathan, paper documents can be challenged, and I have comprehensive digital backups. He storms out without another word. Minutes later, the door slams again, this time from the side entrance. Victoria enters like a gathering storm in designer heels. Are you deliberately attempting to destroy everything we've built? She hisses venomously. I remain perfectly still. If everything encompasses lying, stealing, and manipulating a brilliant man who trusted you implicitly, then yes, that's precisely my intention. Her mouth opens in shock, then closes without response. She spins on her expensive heel and exits dramatically. Grandfather, still sitting quietly, looks at me with momentary confusion, then nods once with academic approval. Well done, he murmurs softly. I sit beside him again, holding his hand. I don't cry. I don't tremble. I feel determination flowing from my core to my spine, steady and purposeful. What I couldn't possibly know yet was that this merely constituted the rehearsal. The actual performance awaited us at Sunday's University Lecture Series inauguration. I arrived 5 minutes early, not from eagerness, but to demonstrate I'm no longer hiding in academic shadows. The auditorium reception area at the university has been staged like a literary magazine photo shoot. Elegant floral arrangements matching the departmental colours, crystal pitchers of cucumber water, and that same pretentious placard on the registration table, Literary Legacy is everything. They're already seated in the front row, except for one chair positioned conspicuously apart, clearly mine. Victoria rises gracefully as I enter. Eliza, she says with exaggerated brightness. We're delighted you could join us. I offer a tight professional smile and walk forward with my leather portfolio tucked securely under my arm. Nathan gestures toward the isolated chair as though seating a particularly troublesome academic critic. Before we begin, he says smoothly, we simply want to establish clear expectations. No academic disputes, no tensions, just family unity. I sit calmly. Victoria clasps her hands like a television host introducing a controversial segment. We're genuinely concerned about your recent behavior. You've been exhibiting concerning patterns, and we thought a professional intervention might be beneficial. She nods toward Nathan, who slides a thick document across the polished table. A complete intellectual rights agreement. 5 meticulously typed pages. Clause 1, I relinquish all rights to grandfather's intellectual property and literary estate. Clause 2, I accept full responsibility for any professional disputes arising during my temporary visit. Clause 3, I agree never to contest any future literary trust or publication decisions. I look up with genuine disbelief. Is this seriously your proposal? Nathan shrugs casually. We simply want to protect Dad's literary legacy and prevent academic complications. And I represent the complication. Frankly speaking, Victoria says, folding her arms, yes, you do. She walks to the mounted presentation screen and with a precise click of the remote displays a carefully curated slideshow. Let's examine the academic timeline objectively, she announces. Photographs begin appearing systematically. Me at library conferences, me at digital archive symposiums, me beside a research facility I haven't visited in years. This illustrates when she prioritized her personal career over family academic responsibilities, she narrates with practiced precision. She chose professional advancement over family legacy. That's her prerogative. She should simply acknowledge it. I remain perfectly still. Next come the emails, screenshots, some deliberately cropped, others presented completely without context. She declined the family holiday gathering. She expressed discomfort returning home. Her exact words, I open my portfolio and methodically begin matching each image with complete email threads, unedited, showing full conversations. I expressed discomfort, I state calmly, because grandfather was being left completely alone for extended periods. I expressed discomfort because during my last visit, you accused me of fabricating concerns about his cognitive decline. Victoria doesn't flinch. You've always been excessively dramatic about academic matters. I turn toward grandfather, seated beside the departmental display, his head drooping slightly. His eyes flutter open briefly, then close again. I notice the prescription bottle on the side table, containing double his prescribed dosage. You've sedated him for this academic charade, I ask, genuinely appalled. He was experiencing anxiety, Nathan interjects smoothly. We didn't want him overwhelmed by the proceedings. Correct, overwhelmed by actual truth. My hands tremble slightly with controlled anger, but I maintain composure. You've orchestrated this entire academic theatre to portray yourselves as noble literary heirs. while systematically excluding the one person who actually preserved his manuscripts, catalogued his research, and genuinely valued his intellectual contributions. Nathan leans back confidently. This approach isn't constructive for anyone involved. No, I agree calmly. It never was, especially not for him. The projection screen suddenly flickers. A connection cable has loosened, and behind it, through the translucent curtain, I glimpse something that affects me more profoundly than anything they've said. The birthday cake from Grandfather's study. The same cake I discovered melting just days earlier. Still untouched, now dried and neglected, sitting on a folding table. Forgotten. Like him. Like my contributions to his work. My stomach tightens with disgust. Victoria follows my gaze, then dismisses it contemptuously. Oh, that old thing. We intended to dispose of it. You couldn't even manage that simple task properly, I whisper. A weighted pause fills the room. Not complete silence, but the dense, oppressive atmosphere of unacknowledged truths hovering between carefully constructed sentences. I stand deliberately and without asking permission, without raising my voice. Walk to the table and lift the forgotten cake. It feels surprisingly light in my hands. Do you recall what occasion this cake represented? I ask, turning toward them. Nathan blinks with confusion. What? This cake was prepared for Grandfather's 80th birthday celebration. You promised to escort him to a special event, then abandoned him alone instead. You posted photographs from an entirely different academic function. You smiled confidently before colleagues while your father sat forgotten in an empty room. And now you expect me to sign away his entire intellectual legacy. Silence descends. I return to my seat slowly, deliberately. This won't become his academic legacy, I state firmly. And it certainly won't become mine. No one moves. They're clearly anticipating an emotional outburst, expecting me to shout accusations or storm out dramatically. Instead, I calmly open my portfolio and methodically arrange copies of bank statements, medical evaluations, and properly notarized publication records. This represents documented reality, I say quietly. Not your carefully curated slideshow, not your selective narrative. When I observe Victoria's expression, tense, cornered, uncertain, I realize something significant. They don't fear me personally. They fear I'll stop allowing them to control the narrative. The atmosphere in the auditorium remains completely still. Even the air conditioning seems to pause momentarily. I feel every gaze in the room waiting for me to break, to retaliate emotionally, to raise my voice. But I don't. I simply look directly at each person present, their artificial expressions, their expensive professional attire, their performative concern disguised as academic integrity, and I nod once. Not from agreement, but because I'm finished playing the defensive academic. I bend down deliberately, reach into my leather portfolio, and withdraw a sealed folder I've preserved for months. Waiting not for revenge, but for historical accuracy. If no one present is willing to acknowledge documented truth, I say with perfect composure, perhaps you'll respect his own scholarly voice. I retrieve my phone, access the voice recording application, and press play. The room fills with the deep, scholarly cadence of Grandfather's voice, recorded one quiet afternoon while I was helping organize his research notes by the window. I realize they assume I'm too intellectually compromised to notice, but I observe exactly what they're attempting. Eliza is the only one who maintained genuine academic integrity. She never wanted anything from me except shared knowledge and time for meaningful discourse. No one speaks, not even Victoria. I allow the weighted silence to accomplish its purpose. Then I slide a second document across the polished table. I didn't come to engage in academic debate, I state. I came to establish documented facts. It's a properly notarized power of attorney, signed and witnessed 6 months earlier by Grandfather himself in the presence of a certified medical professional and an independent legal notary. Completely legitimate and binding. I tap the document deliberately. This legal instrument grants me complete medical and financial authority. It legally supersedes the document Nathan presented last week, the one containing the inconsistent signature and lacking proper witness certification. Victoria seizes the paper immediately. Her eyes scan frantically across each paragraph. This is fraudulent. You manipulated him intellectually. No, I interrupt calmly. You silenced his scholarly voice. There's a fundamental difference. Her lips part to respond, but Nathan interrupts. This can't be legitimate, he mutters, his voice betraying uncertainty. You can't simply present this without prior consultation. I didn't need to, I reply. You simply chose to ignore its existence. I open my portfolio again. Another document emerges. This time, a complete financial analysis. I consulted a forensic accountant to examine grandfather's accounts. Interestingly, his miscellaneous academic expenditures correlate precisely with payments directed to your publishing company, Nathan. His face pales visibly. You charged him for literary consultation services, family legacy preservation packages. You even billed him for a premium digital archive system installed in your personal home office. That constitutes a legitimate business expense, Nathan protests sharply. We utilize that system for academic events, for literary community support programs. No, I say, maintaining direct eye contact. You used it to host private literary salon evenings with your publishing contacts. While grandfather's essential research remained undigitized for 3 consecutive academic terms. Nathan's jaw tightens defensively, but he offers no further denial. Then I reach into my portfolio one final time. This, I say, placing it gently on the table, represents the final version of grandfather's intellectual property trust, properly amended and filed 3 weeks before his cognitive decline became apparent. Victoria's expression contorts with disbelief. That's completely impossible. It exists and was secured in a safety deposit box under his name. Box number 312, First Academic Trust Bank, verified formally this week. I open the document to the final page and indicate the critical clause. All intellectual property rights, published works, and research materials are to be transferred to Eliza Morgan, sole literary executor and designated academic trustee in the event of my cognitive incapacitation. The signatures appear crystal clear. The certification from the university's legal department in Milwaukee remains clearly visible. The amendment stands completely valid. For a prolonged moment, no one moves or speaks. Then Nathan pushes violently away from the table, knocking over his water glass. You orchestrated this entire situation, he accuses harshly. This entire meeting, this academic showdown, you planned it meticulously. I meet his gaze with perfect composure. No, I reply calmly. You initiated the academic misconduct. I simply documented it systematically. Victoria covers her mouth, eyes reddening. She stands abruptly and exits the room. I hear the ladies' room door close forcefully. Across from me, Nathan collapses into his chair as though physically deflated. I stand calmly, adjust my blouse, and gather my documentation. I haven't come to destroy academic reputations, I explain. But I absolutely refuse to allow truth to be buried beneath constructed narratives. Not anymore. Grandfather stirs slightly, eyes partially open. His gaze meets mine and lingers just long enough to communicate he's heard significant portions of the exchange. Perhaps everything. As I return the documents to my portfolio, I sense the atmosphere transform, not through dramatic confrontation or chaotic emotion, but through a deeper, more fundamental shift, the kind that occurs when carefully maintained facades crack, revealing authentic character beneath. I don't experience triumph. I feel liberated. But I also recognize Nathan hasn't conceded defeat, and neither have I. Nathan doesn't leave. While others gather coats or maintain uncomfortable silence, he remains seated, jaw clenched tightly, eyes calculating like someone convinced the academic debate continues. He reaches into his briefcase and extracts a thick manila folder, visibly worn at the corners, suggesting it's been consulted repeatedly. This matter remains unresolved, he states firmly. I don't react defensively. You're absolutely correct, I acknowledge. It isn't. He slams the folder onto the table. My attorney confirms grandfather lacked cognitive capacity when he signed that amendment. That trust document is legally invalid. We'll have it officially nullified in court by next week. I recognize his strategy immediately, his desperate academic Hail Mary. The transition from confident manipulation to desperate deflection. But I've already anticipated this approach. I understand exactly what you're attempting, I say calmly. That's precisely why I arranged for a professional witness. At the far end of the auditorium near the emergency exit, a woman stands deliberately. Professional black pantsuit, clipboard in hand, and a small silver identification badge secured near her lapel. University Ethics Committee representative. Several colleagues gasp audibly. Victoria, who had returned moments earlier, visibly pales. This gathering, I explain, was never simply a family discussion. It constitutes a formal pre-hearing documentation session, comprehensively recorded. Everything stated today becomes administratively admissible. The ethics representative offers a professional acknowledgement. This cannot be happening, Nathan mutters incredulously. You've ambushed an academic reputation. I shrug slightly. No, I provided a professional forum. You simply failed to inquire about the complete attendance list. Victoria leans toward me, voice unsteady. You consider this academic justice? Publicly embarrassing established scholars? I maintain my composure. This isn't about professional embarrassment. This concerns scholarly accountability. Then I address the ethics representative. May I present the video documentation? She nods her approval. I approach the presentation system and connect my laptop to the projector. Ironically, Nathan's own equipment. I activate the playback. The video fills the wall behind me. Grandfather sits upright in his study chair, wearing his favorite tweed jacket I'd given him years ago, his eyes remarkably clear and expressions scholarly. The medical professional sits beside him holding a documentation form. Today is April 11th, she states clearly. Could you explain why you've requested this formal recording? Grandfather smiles with academic precision. I want my family to hear these statements directly from me, not filtered through intermediaries, not misinterpreted through anyone else's perspective. He looks directly into the camera. I've observed how academic ambition corrupts. I've witnessed individuals say all the professionally appropriate things while behaving unethically. I want my intellectual property, my research, my scholarly legacy entrusted to the one person who never treated me as merely academic capital. He pauses meaningfully. Eliza is my chosen executor. I trust her completely. I want her to inherit my entire body of work after my passing. The video concludes with professional clarity. Complete silence fills the auditorium. Then, as though the floor physically shifted beneath him, Nathan pushes himself upright and protests. That could have been coached testimony. He doesn't specifically reference the trust document. Actually, I correct him, he does, just not in this particular segment. I place another envelope on the table. This time it isn't thin or speculative. It carries substantial weight with official university seals, authenticated signatures, and certified documentation. This represents a complete legal video deposition and amendment package, witnessed, properly logged, and submitted to the University Ethics Committee 3 weeks before his cognitive decline became apparent. Your legal team had no access because it wasn't processed through your professional channels. It was filed by his personal academic attorney, entirely separate from the publishing attorney you both attempted to manipulate. Then I present my final evidence. I approach the registration table where an innocent-looking manila envelope sits between the water pitcher and a bowl of untouched conference mints. I hadn't intended to share this information today, I acknowledge, but your actions have necessitated full disclosure. Inside lies a copy of the Lake House deed, properly stamped and filed through the county assessor's office. The property now legally belongs to me, I state quietly. Nathan's head jerks up. What are you saying? You transferred it to your academic LLC for maintenance management. Remember, you allowed the property taxes to lapse, assuming no one would investigate. But I did investigate. I satisfied the outstanding tax lien, acquired the property rights through legal auction, and reclaimed the deed through proper channels. You purchased the lake house? Victoria whispers incredulously. I nod simply. You treated his intellectual sanctuary like disposable property. I preserved it properly. Nathan's fist crashes against the table. You calculated every aspect of this academic takedown. You exploited his condition to undermine our professional standing. No, I reply firmly. You abandoned his scholarly legacy, and I haven't targeted anyone personally. I simply refuse to remain the silent academic who continually remedied your professional misconduct. The atmosphere begins shifting noticeably. The artificial performance disintegrates before everyone's eyes. Finally, several department colleagues excuse themselves quietly. The department chair stands in shocked silence. Even the alumni director discreetly wipes away a tear. Victoria lowers her gaze, lips trembling visibly. But Nathan refuses to concede. He lunges toward the table, knocking over a glass of water, sending documentation scattering. 2 university security personnel waiting discreetly near the entrance step forward immediately. One places a restraining hand on his shoulder. Sir, you need to compose yourself immediately. Nathan's expression crumbles with disbelief, as though his academic reputation entitled him to unlimited second chances. But no one moves to defend him. I gather my documentation, acknowledge the ethics representative professionally, and exit into the sharp afternoon chill. The cold air stings my face. My breath forms visible clouds, but I feel no discomfort. The heavy door closes behind me. And for the first time in years, I don't feel like I'm retreating from an academic battle. I'm advancing towards something infinitely more meaningful. Academic justice doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't arrive with applause or dramatic declarations. Sometimes it appears in the form of a properly filed document. A single truthful statement on video, a sanctuary reclaimed. This wasn't about revenge. It represented intellectual restoration. The drive back from campus proceeds quietly, just the subtle sound of tires on the gravel road and occasional whispers of wind through the window seals. Grandfather sits beside me in the passenger seat, dozing peacefully. He hasn't spoken much since we left the university. He doesn't need to. His fingers found mine as we exited the building, and they haven't released their gentle grip. By the time we reach the lake house, the late afternoon sun begins its gradual descent. The golden light transforms everything it touches. The trees, the wooden deck, the lake surface, even the vintage canoe resting beside the boathouse. It's the kind of luminous quality that evokes memories you've spent years attempting to suppress. I park carefully and help Grandfather into his wheelchair, adjusting the blanket across his lap. His head tilts slightly toward the tranquil lake as we move onto the porch, his breathing shallow but steady. It required several weeks to reach this moment, months actually. But we've finally returned to his intellectual sanctuary. A small table waits near the dock's edge. Upon it rests a fresh cake, chocolate with blue decorative icing, not store-bought this time. I prepared it myself that morning while the house still carried the familiar scent of old books, leather chairs, and academic history. I light a single candle. The flame dances in the lake breeze but remains steadfast. "Happy 80th birthday, Grandfather," I say with genuine warmth. His lips curve into a gentle scholarly smile. "Is this celebration for me?" I nod affirmatively. "Of course it is, specifically for you." He studies me for a prolonged moment, and then something remarkable happens. His eyes, usually clouded recently, suddenly clear with perfect recognition. "Eliza," he says, truly seeing me. He remembers. Tears threaten to emerge, but I maintain composure. I select a fork, cut a perfect portion from the cake, and carefully place it on a small dessert plate. "No melting edges this time," I whisper softly. He chuckles appreciatively. "Excellent. I always disliked when it stained my favorite cardigan." We sit together in comfortable silence, sharing the birthday cake. And for the first time in years, the moment isn't about birthdays or legacies or final intellectual ownership. It's simply about our connection. Later that evening, after settling Grandfather comfortably inside for a rest, I step onto the back porch, allowing the evening to envelop me. The lake house glows softly behind me, its windows capturing the day's final light, like scholarly eyes refusing to surrender knowledge. I retrieve my phone and review the latest updates. The ethics investigation has become public knowledge. Nathan faces formal charges, elder exploitation, document falsification, and numerous financial improprieties. The IRS has initiated a comprehensive audit. 3 separate academic institutions have filed professional misconduct complaints against him. One of his former academic clients posted a warning on the university forum. The headline reads, "He'll maintain perfect professional courtesy while stealing your intellectual property." I wish I could claim satisfaction from these developments. But truthfully, I simply feel completed. Mother hasn't called, not even a brief message. According to recent information, she informed a colleague I'd orchestrated an academic coup motivated by professional jealousy. She couldn't meet my gaze at the university hearing. She didn't attend the final ethics committee session. Perhaps she never believed my account, or perhaps acknowledging she recognized the truth but permitted it anyway proves too painful to confront. But I no longer require her version of resolution. I enter what was formerly Grandfather's private study. Now the walls display watercolor landscapes created by visiting scholars I've invited this past month. The floors show wear from wheelchair access, but no one objects. Comfortable reading blankets drape the armchairs. Classical music plays softly from the vintage record player. And on a corkboard near the window hangs a simple sign. The Morgan Academic Retreat at Willow Lake, for those who dedicated everything to knowledge and were forgotten. We've hosted 4 visiting scholars thus far, 2 retired librarians, 1 hospice literature specialist, and an aging literary critic who hadn't written professionally in years. This project isn't financially motivated. It never was. It's about restoring what had been taken from so many dedicated individuals: intellectual dignity, scholarly recognition, and peaceful contemplation. As I review application materials for next month's visiting scholars, the mail slot creaks open in the front door. I hear an envelope land on the hardwood floor. I retrieve it, examining both sides. No return address, just elegant handwriting addressed to the scholar who changed everything. Inside lies a heartfelt letter. Dear Eliza, we've never met personally, but I knew Nathan professionally. A decade ago, he promised me publication opportunities that ultimately resulted in intellectual property litigation. I lost nearly everything except my academic integrity and my daughter's respect. When I saw your name in the university bulletin, I recognized the same expression I carried for years: exhaustion combined with principled determination. You didn't merely protect your grandfather's legacy. You confronted those who depend on intellectual silence to perpetuate academic fraud. You didn't just preserve his work. You've protected scholars like me as well. Thank you sincerely. I read the letter twice before carefully folding it and placing it within a leather-bound journal where I preserve accounts from visiting scholars. Not for public display, simply for historical documentation. A private archive of academic resilience. I walk onto the dock once more. The lake surface perfectly still beneath the moonlight. My reflection gazes back at me, not younger, not older, simply more clearly defined. Somewhere behind me, grandfather stirs gently in his sleep. And within my spirit, something finally resolves completely. Not revenge, not victory, but authentic peace. Sometimes the family connections we lose create space for the intellectual strength we forgot we possessed. And sometimes true justice doesn't announce itself dramatically. It arrives quietly, illuminates knowledge, and remains.